Well, Terry, it's another Hall of Fame moment here. I don't know what to say here about a guy who there's more people that have ever heard him than probably anybody else. I can't think of anybody. What about you, Terry?
I'm sure that's true.
Bob?
Yes, Paul.
I know, Terry, the one thing about it, how many hours do you think we have spent listening to the Vol Network?
I don't know. I started listening when it was George Mooney, so it's been a while.
There you go, Bob.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, Terry, speaking of George Mooney, he came back to Knoxville during his retirement age, and he lived in a senior living facility down the hall from my mom. And so I got to see George Mooney on a constant basis. He was a wonderful man. And one time I walked in to go see my mom, and I heard his voice booming over the sound system. They were playing beanbag baseball with Bearden High School baseball team, and George Mooney was doing the play-by-play.
Oh, jeez.
And he goes, all right, Ethel's at the plate. There's her pitch. Oh, that's a double. So then Ethel would take off on her walker. She'd get around first base. And just like, that's a double for Ethel. What a great play. And the little ladies beat the tar out of the Bearden baseball team every single time they played. It was amazing.
There you go.
But George was people that don't remember George, he was larger than life.
Yeah.
And just a great spirit, great water skier. People don't remember what a great athlete he was. He owned a lot of radio stations.
He had some great top 40 radio stations.
Yeah, and he had a great voice. And I remember my very first game against Wyoming. It was 50th anniversary of the Vol Network, and so we had invited all the announcers back for the 50th anniversary. And George was the first one up because at that time he was living down in the Virgin Islands and owned a radio station in Puerto Rico. And I said, have you ever been to the radio station? He said, no. I said, I just use it as a tax write-off so I can go down to my house there in the Virgin Islands. So anyway, we get him on the kickoff call-in show for the first game that I'm doing against Wyoming. And George's voice is still booming, and he's talking about the 67 Alabama game and the 56 Georgia Tech game and all these great moments that he was able to call. So we get done with the show, and I said, George, would you like – he had tickets. We got him tickets in the stands, and we're going to honor him at halftime. And I said, would you like to sit in the booth? Oh, I'd love to sit in the booth. Because he hadn't been in the booth since 67, I guess, 68. And so anyway, this is my first game. I'm nervous as hell. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And we're walking up the street, heading to the press box, and George and Tim Priest and I are walking with George, and George puts his arm around me, and he goes, rookie, just remember, 31 years ago, they said there'd never be another George Mooney. So go up there and do the best job you can. I said, George, I appreciate that. It kind of broke the ice a little bit, helped me out a lot. And he sat in the booth, and I'd turn around, and during every commercial break, he'd be giving me a thumbs up and all that stuff. So George was just a wonderful individual, and he led a great life.
Yeah, and then there was some guy in between George and you.
Yeah, a guy named Ward. I think his name was.
I remember him. Yeah.
So, but I grew up. My first job was on the Vol Network was the film editor for the Bill Battle Show. And, they filmed the games, and my job was to go in there, and when they'd stop the camera, I'd put a flash frame on the film. So I'd take a pair of scissors and cut the flash frame out, and then I'd glue the film back together, and that was my job. I got paid $15 a game, and Ward thought I was overpaid, and that's how I met John. And then the next year, or maybe 2 years later, he needed a spotter, and so I was in college, and I was working at WIBK at the time, and so I started spotting for John, and that's kind of how the whole thing started. So humble beginnings for sure.
Didn't you tell me that he lived on a golf course and he collected golf balls and sold them to people?
No, he didn't sell them. He lived on the first fairway at Fox Bend Country Club. And you know, on the first fairway, what do guys do on that first shot? They duck hook it left.
Yeah.
And so all of those balls were going up in John's yard. And John, his hobby was being a gardener. And he had just all these beautiful rhododendrons and azaleas and all these unbelievable flowers in his backyard there. And so people didn't want to go up there and tromp on his flowers looking for golf balls, and so they wouldn't. And so John got all these golf balls, and so they were going to flip sides. They were going to make number 1, number 10. And John and he was, you know, really very private person. I mean, he wasn't out, he wasn't flamboyant at all, except when he was on the air. And so anyway, he started this door-to-door petition campaign to block him from flipping the sides. And he went door to door, and they had town hall meetings and all this kind of stuff so they wouldn't flip-flop the sides. And when they got done, and he won. They didn't do, you know, John was a lawyer who never practiced law, so he knew all the ins and outs of getting people riled up. And so they didn't do it. They didn't flip-flop the sides. And so I went out to see him one time, and I said, John, I don't really understand this. Why do you care? I said, you could be on number 7. You just go out your back door, and you get in your cart, and you play 18 holes and come back in. He said, oh, it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. He said, if you're on number 1, they're hitting brand new balls in your yard. If you're on number 10, they've got all these scuffed up balls. I don't want scuffed up balls in my yard. That'll lower my property value. And so that's true. And so I went, so you go to his house, and he'd have these huge baskets full of Pro V1s that have been hit one time. And he would give you a brown paper bag and say, take some golf balls as a parting gift. And so when you went to his house, you got a bag full of Pro V1 golf balls that have been hit one time. So
Bob Kesling is on the radio with us on Good Times in the Morning. He is going to be inducted into the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame here in just a couple of months, and that's when I wanted to get him on the radio. I tell you, I saw your emotions as you were watching and listening to Mike Keith when he told you the news. And I mean to tell you, I think you were speechless. I really believe that for a moment.
Yeah, I'm sitting there trying to think about what the questions I'm going to ask Rick Barnes and Josh Heupel and Kim Caldwell up on the stage, and I'm on 104.5 trying to fill time till we start the program. And that's what Brent Doherty sent me a text the day before and said, hey, we need you on to fill some time during before we get the coaches on and everything for the Big Orange Caravan. I said, okay. So I show up, and Rick Barnes and I were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden Mike Keith shows up from nowhere. I'm saying, what's going on? And then he pulls out that letter, and very emotional. And Mike and I go back a long, long time. I gave him one of his first jobs at Channel 10. We started a secondary TV channel, and I thought he'd be good doing, because, Mike's I've never seen a guy that's got more photographic memory than he does. He remembers everything. And he remembers lineups from 1965 before he was even born, and he can recite starting lineups for both teams. His recall and memory is unbelievable. But then he started reading the letter, and Mike and I have been just really good friends for a long, long time. And we did baseball games together at the UT. We did baseball games together for the old Knoxville Blue Jays. And I was on Channel 10 at the time, so I'd do the first 3 or 4 innings, then Mike would finish the game up. And so we just developed a friendship. And so I had the honor, Paul, of, what was it, 5 years ago or something like that, when Mike got inducted, and I got the honor to surprise him at the Titans training facility during the SEC basketball tournament. So kind of turnaround is fair play, but they got me. I had no idea it was coming, and I had no idea that what was going on. And Paul, you've been inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame, and it's by your peers, which makes it even more special. And guys that have been through the battles of being on radio and know what it takes. And when your peers award you with a gift like this, it makes it so much more special. And so I'm humbled and honored. And I kind of pinch myself and think, how blessed I've been in my career just to have these great opportunities. And lucky enough that I haven't screwed them up too badly, so I've still got a job.
You know, Bob, if there is one thing that I can say about three things about you, but number one, your love of the Lord. Number two, your family. And number three, kids. I didn't tell him this on the air yet, but you were busy this morning with a bunch of kids and taking care of Boys and Girls Club kids. And, you know, you and I have a relationship that's a little different than a lot of people, but I just got to tell you, I know your heart, and I think just for that, you deserve to be in the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame.
Well, I appreciate that, and you know, you get some honors that you know you don't know if you deserve them or not. But one of the ones that touched me a couple years ago, I was inducted into the Boys and Girls Club statewide Hall of Fame, and that really touched me because you know, when I was a kid. Fourth grade, my mom came in and threw a suitcase on the bed. We were in Fort Worth, Texas, and she said, "Put everything you can in the suitcase. We'll get the rest later." And we jumped in a Dodge Dart, and we drove to Dayton, Ohio. And we had no idea what was going on, but my folks were getting divorced. And so Dad was still in Texas. Mom was up in Ohio. And 3 days later, I'm in a brand-new school, don't know anybody in the state of Ohio. And I was blessed because I had coaches and teachers and dads of my friends that took me under their wing. And Dad would come up when he could from Texas, but that was a long drive. But I had so many people that made sure that I was taken care of, and I've always remembered that. So I try and pay back. And when one thing that I've always kind of lived by is if you have the chance to help somebody else, you have the right to say yes. And that's kind of the way I've tried to live my life. And so this morning I'm at a breakfast here in Maryville. We're raising money for the Boys and Girls Club here in Blount County. And then I got a golf tournament a couple weeks up in Greenville to help the Boys and Girls Club up there. And I just think it's important. I wouldn't be where I was. You know, I made a comment today at this breakfast that a lot of times it's not the most talented team that wins. It's the best team. The guys that play together as a team. I mean, how did Oakland beat Kentucky in the NCAA tournament this year? Well, they did it because they were a better team that night. And there's so many kids in our community, and you know, where you guys live too. There are a lot of kids that are on bad teams, and some of that's not their fault. And it's up to us to try and get those kids that are on a bad team on a good team, so they'll be successful, and in turn, our communities will be more successful. So I'm just a big believer in that, and I try and help out when people ask me to do something. I don't say no. I try and do what I can.
Bob Kesling, if you've just tuned us, he's the voice of the Vols. He's being inducted into the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame here in a couple of months. Bob, let me ask you, and please do this, and I know it takes too long to do the whole story, but would you mind sharing, and maybe you already have somewhere else, it might have just been you and me. I don't know that you've even told this, but in our conversation when we were back here at the studio here in Martin, and we were back in the production room, microphones are turned off, tape recorders not allowed. We just sat there and talked. And you told me a story about a young man that turned his life around because, and let me say that it is because of you that he turned out to be who he is today and how important it is. Would you share a little bit of that? I hate to ask you to do it because I know how private you are about it, but I just think, please do it for me.
Yeah, and I guess you're talking about William, my little brother, and he's special. He, I don't know, it was 15 years ago now, and I'm in my office, and Bert Bertelkamp comes in with somebody, and they from Big Brothers Big Sisters. Bert's a big brother, and he still has a relationship with his little, and that's been 20 years. But Bert says, "Can you be a big brother?" I said, I appreciate you asking, but I don't have time to do that. He said, "Well, can you get some other people here at UT involved?" And I said, "Well, I'll ask some people, but I'm just too busy. I can't do that." So I went home that night. I was watching a baseball game. It was like 12-2 in the seventh inning. I'm thinking, what the heck am I doing here? And I've wasted a whole night. I could have been with a kid tonight. So I called him the next day, and they sent me a kid named William Large, Will the Thrill. And he was in middle school. I guess he was in elementary school at that time, getting ready to go into middle school. And Little Springs, he was one of two kids. Mom's white, he's black. And the dad had 9 kids by 7 different women, and William didn't have much of a relationship with his dad. And so I said, okay, William, we'll get together every Thursday night. And we started doing it. And I'd take him to movies, or I'd take him to UT football practice, or I'd go to dinner and talk to him, or go to my office and we'd work on homework and things like that. And we developed this tremendous bond. And we did that all the way through high school, got him into he got into a junior college to play football, figured out he wasn't good enough to go on to play at Tennessee or Florida State, so he was looking for something to do, and we talked about the Navy. And I said, the Navy will figure out what you're good at. So he enlisted in the Navy. He was out in San Diego. He married a girl that he met at Carter High School, where he eventually wound up. They've got a kid. He's in his 6th year of the Navy. He just re-upped. He got off the USS Abraham Lincoln, and he is now a recruiter just south of Atlanta, and he's part of our family. The people in the Navy convinced him he needed to cut the rope with his mom because she was dragging him down, and so he's part of our family. He's like he calls my daughters. They're like brother and sister, and it's been an amazing relationship. He's married. He's got a kid. He's a full-grown adult. And he told me 2 things when I was driving him on the way to the airport when he was going up for boot camp. He said, first of all, he said, when you came, he had no idea who I was when I first came to see him. He didn't know anything about me or my background or anything. And he told me, he said, after you showed up that first time, I didn't think you were coming back. I said, why was that? He said, well, because I was black. I didn't think you'd come back because I was a black kid. I said, William, I never even looked at the color of your skin. I just saw a kid that needed help, and I wanted to help you. And he also said, you're the only male in my life that's never lied to me, which about wrecked the car when he said that. But I've grown as much from our relationship as he has. And I'm so proud of him, and can't wait to go down to Atlanta to see him. And he's a remarkable story. And it's just, there's so many kids in our communities that just need help, need somebody to talk to. So that's kind of the moral of the story. And I get more out of it than he does. I'll tell you that much.
Bob Kesling, everybody. Bob, we got 3 minutes, so keep it to it, because I gotta ask you to tell one more story about William. Yeah. About being on the boat and the basketball games. Can you jump into that for 3 minutes? Can you do it in 3?
Yeah, I'll do it real quick. So anyway, he goes from a kid that can't change the oil in his car when he's going to Carter High School to a guy that can now fix jet engines on an aircraft carrier. I mean, it was incredible. And so they played the basketball game 2 years ago against Michigan State and Gonzaga. Well, they just had essential people on the boat because they had the courts and they had the scoreboards and all that stuff. But they put William in charge because there's nothing broken on the boat, so they put him in charge of checking the players in. Told him, leave the players alone, don't take selfies. Of course, first thing he does, he gets a selfie with Drew Timme, the big star of Gonzaga. And then Tom Izzo in Michigan State shows up. And he said, I need to see your ID. And Coach Izzo said, well, I left my ID back at the hotel. So we can't get on my boat without your ID. He said, I'm Tom Izzo, the head coach of Michigan State. He said, well, congratulations, but you're still not getting on my boat. And now the assistant goes, well, he's Tom Izzo. We got practice. We got to do all this stuff. And William goes, I'm busy too, but I've got my ID and I'm on the boat. You don't, and you can't get on my boat. So they start, rah, 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 and finally goes, what's your name? Again, it's Tom Izzo. He looks down the list, sees it. Said, okay, I see you on the list. How do you spell that? He goes, I-Z-Z-O. I said, okay, I got it. All right, I'm going to let you on my ship today, but you better have your ID tomorrow because I won't let you on my ship tomorrow. And he said, okay. So then they let them all on the board. So they get him in, and then his buddy next to him goes, William, didn't you know who that was? That was Tom Izzo. And he goes, I know exactly who that was. I was just screwing with him. I mean, how many times do you get to mess around with Tom Izzo like that? So it was. So I taught him something. I taught him something. Take advantage of it when you can. But hey, Paul, I appreciate you and Terry, what you guys do for that community up there. And Terry, I know you've done it for so long. So have you, Paul. You guys are pillars of that community, and I really thank you for what you've all done. And Paul, I appreciate our relationship.
Well, I love you, and I appreciate everything you and I talk about because I always learn something, but I know where your heart is. And I'm really, really proud to hear what you shared with me yesterday. Hey, listen, just save a seat or two, okay? And
I got you.
We'll be up there, and I tell you what, I'll be right there on the front row watching you get that medallion wrapped around your neck. So congratulations.
Thanks, Paul.
You bet.
Have a good day.
Yes,
Thanks,
sir.
guys. Talk to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bob. What a great, great storyteller. I think he's one of the best storytellers I think I've ever heard.